most of you know that this is going to be a session devoted to Apple products. And for those of you that either have them, we want to see if there's enough interest in having a subset of Tug that is just an Apple user group for emails and for having meetings once in a while. But before we get to that, I wanted to note that Baron Cashdollar and Alan Roth are both on, and they're both members of the Exxon Computer Club, and I always invite them to come to Tug sessions, and they're here. So Alan happens to be the Apple expert within the Exxon group, and every year he does a dog and pony show where he goes to Apple, buys, I don't know, $50,000 worth of products, brings them all and not demonstrates, but lets us handle them all, and then takes them back to Apple. And this is an arrangement that Apple knows he does, and it kind of works well. And that's, anyway, they will be having another one of those in the future, and I'll make sure that any of you interested are invited to join us. And let me also say that they meet monthly on the first Thursday of the month, but not during the summer. So they're starting up again, and this Thursday will be an Exxon Computer Club session. There's approximately 15 of us that are on a list that I keep that I invite to that. But if anybody else is interested, please let me know and I'll certainly add you. And this time it is on technology then and now. So we'll see where that takes us. So without further ado, we have 3 individuals who over the last year or so have basically at least transition some of their applications from other operating systems to Apple, and or maybe converted wholly. And we're going to have each one of those give us a few minutes on their experience, pros and cons, things that they were pleased with, things that didn't go so well. And then we'll have a discussion around that. So want of a better way of doing it, I'll go alphabetically, and that would mean that Mark Edelman would be up first.
Did you just call on me?
Yes, I did. Well, I mean, if that's okay with you. I mean, I just decided, and I had to have some way of deciding who was first, and I went alphabetically.
Yeah,
and your last name comes first.
Well, that's fine. I'm happy to talk. So I had previous experience with Apple because I have an iPhone and I have an old iPad. Now, I really like my iPhone, but we're not going to talk about that. What I wanted to talk about is converting from a PC to a Mac. Specifically, I bought the new iMac with the M1 processor. Why did I do it? Okay, Tom asked me some very good questions. And the first one was, what inspired you to convert? Well, it was kind of a whim, there isn't necessarily a strong rational reason to do this, but the Apple design and system appealed to me. And I wanted the smooth synchronization of the iPhone and the desktop computer. So those are the best reasons I can give. And part of it was, those pictures where they advertise the Apple, and there's always a very clean desk with nothing on it. And then the Apple is sitting on the desk looking elegant because it is elegant. It looks so much nicer than the PCs do. So that was part of the appeal, I guess. Anyway, his next question was, will you keep a dual presence with some things on Windows? My answer to that is no, I'm trying not to. I haven't used my PC in a number of weeks now, and I'm trying not to use it anymore. I want to retire it. Did it live up to my expectations is the next question. And the answer is very mixed. In some ways, it did not. I thought I would have greater simplicity. I don't think I do overall. Now, I'm a demanding computer user. I use the computer a great deal and I do a lot on it. So that could be part of the reason why my experience is still that everything is complex. The Mac system might seem like it's simpler, but you still get into these headachy problems and you have complexities that you wish you didn't have to have. Another aspect of this is assessing what I got. Apple equipment is good, but it's not always better. For example, the built-in things in the Mac they're well designed, but the features of them are pretty limited. And then you miss the features that you used to have. The operating system is tightly integrated, it's well designed, but it's not all good. There's some things that were really easy to do on the PC that are not as easy on the Mac, surprisingly. Little things. Just moving a file is actually less easy on the Mac than it was on the PC. Another example is that the Mac is heavily mouse dependent. And for some reason, the operating system does not enable useful keys on the keyboard to do useful things when you'd like them to. For example, the home, the end, the page up, and the page down keys are a lot less useful in the Mac system than they are on a PC. And that really surprised me. And it's very difficult, if not impossible, to change that. Then there are two more issues. There's cost. Well, apples are expensive. In return for the extra money, you get elegance and you get power. So you should not compare a Mac, for example, to a low-priced PC or laptop. You should compare it to a high-priced one, because then the capabilities are similar. And then the price is not that different. But yes, Apple is expensive. But if you are a heavy computer user like me, and you spend a lot of time on the computer, that dilutes the expense. And I think it didn't really make a difference to me. I was happy to spend the money. And then there's the matter of longevity, which is important. You buy this expensive machine and you like to get a lot of years out of it. Well, I think this is really the same with PCs and Macs. The machine itself might last you 10 years. I mean, something might go wrong with it, but in general, it might last you 10 years. But after about 5 years, you're going to begin to feel that it's a little bit outdated. You're going to want, in the case of PCs, you're going to want more RAM because the newer operating system wants you to have more RAM. You might need a larger disk. And most of all, you might have reasons why you can't upgrade to the latest operating system. That's true on the Apple, and it's true on PCs as well. I think PCs last a little longer. I think after 5 years, probably the Apple company is going to start pressuring me to upgrade. There's one more thing I want to mention, and that is, how do you make the transition? The first phase of it, aside from buying your equipment, the first phase of it is learning about it. And that means a learning curve. I found that the Apple manual and help files are better than the Microsoft by a little bit. The next thing is setting up your Mac. They claim that it's easy. Well, it's only easy if you are a very light computer user. If you're a heavy computer user and you want everything just right, it's not easy. It's complicated and you have to learn a lot. The next phase is setting up your apps. Now, you get a lot of built-in apps. They're good, but they're limited. And you have to ask yourself, do the apps you were using on Windows have an equivalent on the Mac? And you have to research that. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And also some things cannot be transferred. For example, I've been using TurboTax for a number of years, and I always kept the earlier years versions of TurboTax just in case I wanted to do something with it. There's no way to transfer that. You know, that's just an example of something I lost. But a lot of things do transfer. And then you have to ask yourself whether the data that you have associated with an app is going to transfer or convert for use on the Mac. And each one is different. So for example, I'm a user of Quicken, and I had to convert my data. On the other hand, I didn't have to pay extra because my license, you know, Quicken is an annual license now. My license covers one user, not one computer. So I was able to download and install Quicken on the Mac at no extra costs. And I was able to convert the files. When I did the conversion, there were problems. Oh yes, I had quite a few problems, but I got through them. If you have data in the cloud, like your email, of course, there's no problem there. You don't have to convert anything, and you don't have to migrate anything. You just have to access it. If you have local data, you have to move it over to your Mac and maybe convert some of it. Files that came from Microsoft Office don't need to be converted. So that's a good thing. The main thing about migrating is to keep track of what you're doing. That is absolutely the most important thing. You do not want to get into what I call migration hell. Migration hell is where you've copied your data from your PC to your Mac. but you kept working on the data on the PC, and now you don't know what's up to date and what isn't. And there's no easy way to find out except by going through each of the files and comparing the dates and all that. You don't want to do that. So you want to keep track very carefully of everything you do. You have to keep a log. And I kept my log on Dropbox so that I could access it from either computer. One more thing. I'm talking too long, but one more thing. The App Store. If you want to get more apps, some of them are downloaded directly from internet sites, but many apps have to be found in the App Store. I have a very low opinion of the App Store. It's a mess. The search doesn't work well. The reviews that you find on the software are almost worthless. Most of them are outdated. Some of them are deceptive. And the App Store does not really tell you what an app costs. Sometimes it does, but very often it does not, and you have an unpleasant surprise. On the other hand, Mac apps are not very expensive. That's it. I could go on and on and on about some of my experiences, but I think I'll stop there.
Okay, well, maybe at some point in the future, if there's enough interest, we'll come back to some of the specifics that you talked about. I'd like to keep the discussion, if nobody has a burning question, I'd like to keep it until after we hear all three of our presenters. And if you have something you really feel is necessary to say now, raise your hand and I'll call on you. But I just wanted to comment that I'm using a MacBook Pro that was built in 2013. I bought in January 2014. I'm still using it. It works quite effectively, and I've had no pressure whatsoever from Apple to try to convert. I probably will convert and want to convert to, and not convert, to buy a new machine and transition to a newer machine is largely because it's getting old and I'm running out of memory and things of that sort, even though I bought the biggest possible at the time. And when I do a whole bunch of things together, the processors are slow. Anyway, let's go on to Mitch Erickson, if he's ready.
I am. First of all, Mark, a lot of your experiences, my experiences parallel. Although I don't do TurboTax, so I didn't have that particular problem. Real quickly, personal history. I started on a shared PC that I would take my 5.25 floppy that had WordStar and my files on it, and I would shove it in there. And then not too long after that, I moved jobs. And we had a giant deck system, and that was when I started with email and the whole thing. Then I had something called a Nicolay computer attached to an instrument in the laboratory that didn't even it had a paper printer for instead of a monitor. Then I was with a Mac for a bunch of years, then a PC, and then finally I just switched back to a Mac. Almost all of those, except for the last change, were driven by the work environment I was in, and pretty much being told, "This is your computer," and so then I would mirror that at home with the personal devices I had. So I had home PC or home Mac and home work Mac and PC at work in my home. Anyway, last December, I had an Acer. I'd had it for 5 years, 6 years. Reasonably happy, but it was slowing down. And my repair guy said, "Well, you need to upgrade the RAM." So I bought $60 worth of RAM and stuck it in there, and screwed back the plate. Thing never turned on. Never ever turned on again. And so he came and said, "I think your motherboard's fried. You're screwed." So I was about to take it off to a repair shop, and Tukey says, "I can help you." So I went to Paul's house, and the next thing you know, I've borrowed his PC, his old one, and I used that for a few weeks while I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. I switched to Mac partly because I was pissed off, and partly because, kind of like Mark said, the operating system seemed to be cleaner. The whole system, it just seemed cleaner, and I figured, I was deep into the iPhone world, and maybe that would help me with some problems that I'll get to in a minute. So I bought this at MacBook Pro, and I had it for a couple of weeks, and I said, I don't really like this small screen. So Apple was gracious, and they allowed me to exchange the MacBook Pro for an iMac. I got the one with a big screen, and the short answer is I love it. The longer answer is that that was in February by the time I got everything into the house. Um, and one of the things that I felt I wanted to do, and I think everyone want to do, and I'll come back to this also, is minimize the number of ecosystems you're in. And for instance, the minute I got my iMac going, uh, all the pictures that were on this phone, several thousand that would never download to my PC, in like a couple of minutes, boom, they were there, and the 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 photo software on the Mac um, had created phase tiles for each one of the people that were in a group photo. So I had a picture of 10 people, became 11 files. I was up to 600,000 photo files, and when I transported it over to the Mac, it went down to 39,000. So that was right there a huge issue. Now 39,000 is still way too many photos, but that's another day. Anyway, so at this point, I I have an iMac, I have an iPhone, and I just bought an iPad because I need to have something that I can tote around for travel and so forth that I haven't really gotten in the habit of using much. It turns out you can do a heck of a lot on your iPhone if you're willing to put up with the virtual teeny weeny keyboard. Um, and I also moved everything to iCloud so that I would stay within that ecosystem. And that turned out to be a big problem. I'd been on the Microsoft OneDrive, and uh, Microsoft kept coming in and overriding everything, and shoving my files back into OneDrive even when I said no. And I finally, I think, got enough. I finally got the OneDrive disconnected, canceled the subscription and so forth, and finally got that to the point where it doesn't intercede anymore. But that was part of the migration hell. The other part is that when it transferred the stuff from Paul's loaner PC to my new Mac, it didn't give me the option. So I ended up with Paul as a user on this Mac. It just transferred that whole user profile into this Mac. So I had to, at some point along, get rid of that. Oh, and the other thing with iCloud, there is a free part that's really small memory, but it's costing me $10 a month, $9.99 to be exact. And so I'm in the Apple ecosystem for all of my hardware, but I am habitual with Microsoft Office, and I have that. And I also, in another fit of peak here a year and a half ago, switched from Comcast to Google to Gmail. So I have Gmail and Gcalendar and Google Contacts, and all of that kind of works together okay. But for instance, if you send me an email with an attachment, if I want to put that attachment into a file folder and not just kind of look at it, I have to download it and then grab it and then do a save as to get it to the folder I want it in. But what Google does with Gmail is make it really, really easy to put it into the Google Drive. I mean, they just one click and your files in Google Drive. So they want you to be using Google Drive. and all of these guys are competing with their own products, and they all want me to use their products. And occasionally, I'll open something in like a spreadsheet that somebody sent me, and it'll pop up, and numbers will open up, and which is the Apple version of Excel. But anyway, so the bottom line, it worked well enough. There is the I forget the title of it, but there's a transfer genius or something, and you set it up, and it will do an awful lot of that stuff that in my memory was really painful with PCs. And that might be just partly because I did all that stuff a long time ago. But and we may want to talk about this more, but to minimize the ecosystems you're in, and all of these people would love for you to have everything in the ecosystem. I have a daughter-in-law who works for Google, and she has a Chromebook, and everything is in the Google ecosystem, and works just fine for her. Other people are completely on Microsoft and Windows. But when you get into multiple ecosystems, and I think we all have some of that problem simply because we're old guys and we did this or we did that 20 years ago, and it kind of carries with us. So I think I'm going to stop right there. We'll let number 3 talk, and then you guys can ask questions. But that's my story. I'm sticking to it.
Thank you, Mitch. We appreciate it. This stuff isn't easy. It does take time to get used to it. And just let me make one generalized comment. Sometimes it's hard. If you're used to one thing, it's hard to determine if the new thing is better or not, because you want the old habits come through and you want to do it the old way. Even though if you started from ground zero, you might find that it is simpler, but it's not simpler because of where you're coming from. So that's always a piece of this all too. Mm-hmm. Okay, George Coe, are you ready?
Yep. I'm a little different than Mitch and Mark in that you can see behind me, that was the first computer that I really got to take apart and tinker with. This was back in 1975. I was doing laser research, and we got a DEC PDP 1145 to do a lot of the research, and also we wanted to be able to connect it to some of our equipment. And what we had gotten was Linux or Unix back then. We got the first copy, version 6, and then it was upgraded to version 7 from Dennis Ritchie himself. We drove there from Farmingdale, Long Island, where our graduate school was, and got brought our disc along. He happily gave us a copy of the Unix operating system and source code. And that's where I learned C and how operating systems work, by taking it apart and learning how to write device drivers and all that good stuff. Anyway, ever since then, I've always been a fan of Unix and Linux, and tend to keep that environment going. Even when I was going to devices, for example, iPads, well, tablets and phones, I was using Android, which again is very similar to a Linux type operating system. But because of family desires and influences, the first thing I switched to was the iPhone. And then from that went to an iPad. And that was all because of FaceTime. Again, keeping in touch with the family, FaceTime was a big bonus. And that brings me to the why I went to the MacBook Air. Basically for 2 reasons. One is cost. I found a great deal on refurbished machines, And to be honest, I've had no problem with it. When it came in, it looked brand new, all spanky and shiny, no sign of wear and tear. Then the other issue was that it had a very good, well, the new hardware, shall I say, that it was going to, with the M1 processor, it was going to give me a lot of features that I really wanted. The other thing is that under the hood in Mac OS is really Linux, or a version of Linux or Unix. And therefore, for me to move over using the command, the terminal tool, I was able to basically take control of the machine and do everything I wanted. Some of the commands were a little different, like where is was where. So it just took me a little time to figure out how they changed it. But the other thing is, because I really was on a Linux environment, I was using open source software. So Firefox and Thunderbird, I immediately brought over, and that was very easy. They had Mac OS versions of it. The other tools I use, for example, like Mark said, Quicken came over pretty easy. And since I was able to download my data from the from Quicken's website, where I was backing it up, that went pretty easy. There were some differences. Different categories were added. The behavior of adding new items was changed also. But all in all, not that much of a problem. The other things, for example, like a graphics editor, I use GIMP, and that has also become available, that you can download it. There are two tools which can really be used to your advantage to make the system more to your liking. And one of them is Homebrew, where you can actually get a lot of the open source software and bring it onto your Apple. The other one is MacPort, and it does the same thing, but what it does, MacPort actually brings source code down and compiles it. Homebrew already has it pre-compiled and brings it down. So, as I said, one of the things I also do is I have an encrypted file system that I keep on Dropbox. And there's encrypted file system, which is a user file system that you can add, bring down and compile and add it into your system. And that was quite easy. One of the big issues I had with it was, since I wasn't really getting rid of any machines, any real hardware, my main computer, which has about 10 terabytes of storage on it, was not really connecting to the Apple efficiently. I wanted to connect using NTFS, but Apple decided that it wasn't going to use NTFS anymore and was only going to support SMB, which is actually a Microsoft product, but for a long time, You may have heard of Samba, which is a open source software that emulates the sharing file system of Microsoft, of Windows. And one problem is that it transfers in small packets. And therefore, when I mount a drive on my Apple, on my Mac system, it would take a long time to back up or transfer files. But all in all, it was doable. I had no problems with it keeping track of who I was and changing the authorization and the username on either system when it was transferred over. I did do backups, but again, very slow. I found that using FTP to transfer files was more efficient, and again, because it did use multiple processors and larger blocks, the transfer was a lot faster. The big issues I found with the Mac OS was that you really can't add on to the hardware because of the reasoning, I guess, is the memory and the RAM is integrated into the CPUs that Apple decided not to allow users to go in and start dropping in more and more memory. The other thing is that the compilers that Apple provides are typically a generation behind, and therefore I found that I had to bring a whole set of drivers, GCC, etc., Fortran, all those good utilities had to come down. Perl 5 and Python 8. So they, again, it was adding in all these items in. And right now, I'd say I'm happy with it, that the value is here. The performance is outstanding. And the thing I want to play with next is that it has an AI chip built in. And what's interesting is you can actually develop a program that will use the AI chip that can be ported to the newer Apple phones and Apple iPads. So I'd like to play with that some. So anyway, that's all I really have to say about it. And I'm pretty happy with it. Still.
Okay. Thank you, George. And I would, a number of our speakers have indicated that getting to or trying as much as possible to stay within one ecosystem. And that was one of the primary reasons why I switched 8 years ago. It just, things work better when it's all Apple or all Microsoft or all Google or whatever, and trying to squeeze time. Now, of course, it's very hard to do that completely, but it as a goal to aim towards, that's what I was doing. And I pretty much, like, I've been able to use numbers and pages as opposed to Microsoft, but there are things that you can't do that way. And so I still use Gmail. I'm not switching from Gmail, so whatever. Anyway, let's go on to questions. And the first hand I see is Walt Meissner.
Yes, I just want to mention a couple of my experiences because, for my wife, I bought Apple simply because I didn't want to spend a lot of time, maintaining it and doing upgrades. But, over the years, Apple has migrated from the PowerPC, because my wife had an iBook G4 to the Intel processor and now the M1 processor. And, this can be a little bit disconcerting. People mention, the lifetime of a machine. When they went off the PowerPC, they still supported the OS for a while, and then they didn't do that. And Firefox, which I use, would supply, a PowerPC version, but then after a while they didn't either. And then websites became, had more and more features in it that the Firefox didn't work with. So it kind of compelled it to move to an Intel machine. And moving from an Intel to an M1 machine, I'm really looking to get an Apple as my next machine, and I think I probably wait a little bit longer before I get the M1. But I have a lot of legacy software that works on the Intel processor. I mean, I have dual versions of it. Works on the PC and works on the Mac. And I've talked to Apple about it for a while, and they tell me they have a conversion program that takes Intel binary code and converts it to M1 binary code, and then you run with that. And I asked them, well, does that work for all programs? And they mentioned to me a couple known issues with certain programs. But so that's always an issue because that's a tricky thing to do and do reliably. The other thing that's a little bit annoying with Apple products is they keep changing the the interface, connectors that you were using in the beginning. They were using FireWire, then they moved to Lightning, and now they're kind of pressured to go to USB-C. So every, if you have a range of Apple laptops that straddle, generations, you need new cables for each one. You can't just use the same cable all the time, even though FireWire was really perfectly workable. And then the other thing about Apple is, over the years, they've consistently locked down their hardware. The iBook G4, I could add memory stick, memory modules to it. I could even have swapped out the disk drive if I wanted to and put in a larger disk drive. And that now things are locked down. It's, the memory chips and the, now they use the solid state drive. They're soldered to the motherboard. So, to change them out means unsoldering it. And the spacing between the leads is like 1/10 of a, they're too close to be able to do anything with it. One thing I like to know, and maybe Alan Ruth could answer this question, is I really like the browser on the PC because I can expand a tree-like structure, and I have a habit of doing very long file names, 30 to 50 characters, where I have my own, method of, putting information in, so I know what's in the file before I even open it. And Apple browser doesn't do that. They give you at best 4 columns, and the complete file name doesn't show up. And I want to look through multiple trees, looking from one tree branch to another. The other thing I like about Apple is there's less OS upgrades. Over the years, there's the PC was a constant upgrade. Each one are like gigabytes in size, and a lot of them fail, and there's nothing to click on to tell you why they fail. They give you a number. I can't even copy that number. I have to type it in and Google and spend half an hour or hours trying to figure out why something didn't load. So that was, for me, that's a reason to get away from a PC. Consequently, on the other side, if I run into an Apple, like I've upgraded on an Apple OS version, and it went into an endless loop, and I kept it overnight to make sure it wouldn't recover by itself, and it didn't. But if I call up Apple, they tell me exactly what steps to take to be able to, get everything back up and running. So that's pretty nice. The Apple, as others have mentioned, have a, it's all Apple hardware and it's a consistent ecosystem versus, PC free for all. Anybody can offer hardware and software and drivers, and sometimes they conflict with other stuff. And I think Microsoft has a big problem, getting them to have consistency. The Apple hardware design, because I always look at things from a hardware point of view, they really do a lot of research in terms of what they pick, the best graphic processors, very nice chipsets. When they pick the Intel chipsets, they'll do nothing less than, really high resolution PC screen, display screens. At least half of them will be retinal grade. Whereas in the PC world, they'll, in order to hit all price points, they come out with basically a very sub-resolutional screen. And, and also like the interoperability between us and iPhone and PC in terms of transferring photos, I've had nothing but problems with. So being a consistent ecosystem. But, as far as the file browser, if anybody knows of, an application I can add to get a file browser that works the same on PC, I'd like to know about it.
Okay. Thank you, Walt. And anybody can put anything in the chat room or can just, send a note if you have ideas that can help Walt. But let's go to Alejo.
I empathize with all of the remarks that Mike, Mark, and George made. When I grew up with Unix at Bell Labs, so I went through all of the research versions of Unix and then discovered that the corporate versions of Unix distributed by AT&T had their idiosyncrasies as well. But then I had to use the corporate PC systems, which are all Microsoft based. So I was schizophrenic for many years of my life, having to deal with both the Microsoft world and the Unix world. When I went to Columbia, I discovered that almost all of the people in the computer science department had Apple computers. And I think almost all of the people that went to the same conferences that I did were using Apple computers. And so I switched from using Windows to the Apple world and have never regretted it. But I thought I had a complicated computing environment, but after listening to Mike, Mark, and George, I have a very elementary computing environment. I have probably 8 different devices of my own. My wife has 3 devices. They're all Mac-based. But one of the issues that I've encountered is that I'm a big fan of having a single ecosystem if possible. But occasionally I have to co-author papers using Google Docs, and my co-author is on a Windows-based machine. And then I get to see some very interesting subtle differences, like Windows uses slightly different representations of characters than Apple does. I don't know whether people have noticed this, or maybe this is a feature of the tech world and the LaTeX world, where I do all my paper writing in LaTeX. For example, an apostrophe is different in the when you typeset it in the Windows world than the Apple world. I don't know whether any other people have experienced these subtle differences between the two ecosystems. But I have a question. My wife is also an iMac user, And on her iMac, she's been a computer user for a long time. She has an AOL mail account. And all of a sudden, the Apple mail program ceased to work. It's not consonant with the mail account when you log into mail using AOL mail. And I tried to find out what the cause of this is. And the best I can determine, it's a caching problem somewhere. Maybe it's in iCloud, maybe it's in her iMac, but she can access her mail on AOL quite conveniently from her iPhone and her iPad, but she can't do it using the Apple Mail program on her iMac. If anybody can tell me about how to solve this problem, I looked on the internet and discovered that there are other people who had this problem, but the solution they recommended was purging all of the things in your cache in the cloud. And I'm afraid to do that because there are something like 500 entries in the cache when I looked at what was in the cache, and I don't know what disaster I'd invoke to her mail accounts if I did this. So I'd appreciate any advice on how to restore her Apple Mail program on the iMac. But she can use the AOL mail program quite comfortably, or not so comfortably because the user interface on AOL mail sucks. But she can use it and access her mail from AOL mail on the iMac. So there are these subtle idiosyncrasies and differences even in the apps. So I'm open for suggestions on how to simply fix this. I don't want a nuclear solution.
Before we go on to the next hand, is there anybody that can make a comment on that wants to?
Well,
Just one question on it. Al, are you using an Intel-based Mac or is it a newer processor?
These are all 8 and 9-year-old iMacs.
Oh, okay, so they're probably they might even be Power PCs, and no, they're probably Intel processors.
They're Intel processors.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the problems I've seen is that some of the a lot of the apps can be ported over to the M1 processor without any problems. But when you're going to the Intel, it has to use an emulator to run the Intel code underneath it. And that does cause problems. Yeah, I've been reading about the cache, and I would probably say it's not a good idea, like you said, to remove it. It can cause quite a bit of harm.
You and I have the same instincts.
Yeah.
Is there a way to partially clear the cache rather than the whole cache?
Well, I can go through 500 items individually, but I didn't want to spend that much time. And then how do you test whether you cured the problem?
Mark Edelman, did you want to add something? Because you started to speak before.
Well, if the AOL email is hosted on a website that you can access, doesn't that mean that the caching will be recreated if you delete it? Won't it just get recreated?
Well, the interesting aspect is she can access her email on her iPhone and her iPad quite nicely, but not on her iMac.
Yeah, I understood that, but the problem is in the iMac. But my point is that the cache that you're looking at, you said it was on iCloud. Wherever it is, it should get recreated. And then you might end up with the exact same functionality that the iMac would still have a problem, but you might not. That was my point.
Well, she recently changed her password on AOL Mail. And when she tries to access the AOL Mail from the Apple Mail program, it says user unknown. But when you go to the AOL website, she can happily be recognized by the AOL website. So that's why I think that her old password is somehow embedded in a cache somewhere. And I haven't got the foggiest idea of which cache it's in.
I think I might know the problem in that AOL has changed its security setup, and they've added two-factor authorizations and also program link authorization. And you need to set it up so that the specific program is authorized. So you go on the AOL account through your browser, and you can see the history of what's being connected there. And so maybe that version of the mail program on your iMac, it has not been authorized to use it.
Oh, that's a good thought. I'll look into that. But I'm sure people have much more pressing issues than this. So I don't want to take up all the time on this topic.
Okay, let's move on to Griff then.
Hi, I'm one of the longtime users of Mac. I got my first Mac 15 years ago, which is a little inaccurate. My first one was actually for my daughters when they were going to college. But of the current generation, which is Mac OS, I started 15 years ago. And I have been treating them as Unix workstations. I only go to the internet when I absolutely have to. I don't read my mail from the internet. I mean, obviously I do, but I go directly to the Comcast SMTP server to get my mail. And I use Apple's Mail app, which does everything internal on my iMac. I've acquired a large database of messages that I keep up to date daily, really, filing my mail. Anyway, I find, for me, treating it as a Unix workstation works very nicely. I get the mail system is beautifully designed. It allows me to construct a hierarchical, time-based record of my mail, which I suspect you're doing on the web as well. I sort of doubt that you're doing what my wife is doing, which is throwing everything into one big folder. And when I finally say, okay, it's been a year, let's make a new folder and at least organize this stuff by year, I organize it by month. In general, I was delighted to hear the reviews. I I don't want to get into a long rambling dissertation, but I am a very happy user of this, and I've been delighted with how well Apple updates the systems. When I got my I switched to an iMac from a Mac Pro 2 years ago. And the change was with my display was amazing. They had switched to the P3 color space, which means that the colors are considerably more accurate than they are with the Adobe with the sRGB color space that the app that Windows still tries to encourage, though it grudgingly allows of Adobe RGB, I believe. If anybody has any questions about how I do my work, I'd be happy to get into conversations with you, but I think I'd better stop rambling and
Yes, we need to move on because we still do have 2 short demos to do, and there are 2 more questions or 2 more hands raised anyway. And part of the purpose of today was so that we would know each other as to who are Apple users and what the issues are, in hopes of starting some sort of dialogue or forum going forward. You know, maybe periodically having a TUG meeting, but also just creating an email chain so that people can ask questions and not bore everybody. Ed Aiken is next.
I'll try to unmute. I'm muted now?
No, you're unmuted. We can hear you.
Yeah, I got an Apple in the spring of 2014 after having a lot of trouble with Dell and Windows. And I can say what I had a lot of support with Best Buy helped transfer some files, whatever I could do. And support is much better from Apple. You know, and I, had it customized with features that I wanted on the computer. And I also did a lot of one-on-one training, which Apple no longer does, made it much more user-friendly to use. I never had a virus, any issues, and they were always helpful when you reach them on the phone.
They do, Ed, just so you know, they do have tutorials that you can go online and get,
Yeah, I used to do
not
the
one-on-one, but the tutorials also work.
Right. And I just can't stay on much longer. I have to officiate a tennis match up in your area. I can't play school this afternoon. So I'll be busy this afternoon. I have to get up there at 3 o'clock. So
Okay.
yeah, it was great presentation, and I'm much happier with the Apple. I was dealing with the Windows idiots from. I gotta be careful. I don't want to offend anybody. People from India, like in a lot of scams from people with the Windows. It's so much better the Apple.
Okay.
And support.
Paul, I notice your hand's up.
Yeah, well, I was going to say something about mail. Well, a quick question to Al, without just going completely back to that thread, but does the Apple Mail program talk to the AOL mail server using IMAP? Is that what we're talking about?
It's the IMAP part that gives it the problem. The SMT part works.
Yeah, so with IMAP, my understanding is, and I've done a lot of mail support for a lot of people, that all of the mail that you have in your IMAP folders on your computer exists in the cloud. So that's the cache, I guess, that you're talking about. But you can blow that whole thing away and just recreate it. So I've done this for so many people as a tech support person at Carusa and places when their mail gets totally screwed up because we were using Thunderbird, but you just blow the mail account away and recreate it from scratch and let it download everything and sync up. And now it's fresh and it's whatever the glitch is gone. I mean, you should be able to do that without even blowing the old one away. You could just create a new mail account that goes to the same server. Disable the first one by maybe changing its server credentials or something, and then create a new one and just see if it just downloads and completely syncs up. Anyway, on this question of what computer do you want to move to, and and it's a question of, is this better than that? I like Apple. I've always had some Apple. I've got a MacBook, and Windows I never liked at the beginning, but I've come to peace with it. But for me, it's not just a question of what computer do I like, but and you talk about ecosystems. Well, I think about human ecosystems and the people that I hang out with, and the people I provide tech support with, and the people I share software with, and insights. And for me, the app that the Windows part of my world is much bigger and more significant than the Apple part. And I mean, here we have the Old Guard membership database. That's a pretty important thing for Old Guard, and I run it, but it can't run on Apple because nobody's ever ported Microsoft Access to an Apple device. And and my wife and all kinds of people I provide tech support for. I wish we could provide better Apple tech support for our Apple people. We had this problem just this past week with our speaker, this morning's speaker. He has an Apple, he's an iMac. He's a very non-technical person, and it's a pretty new machine. And he simply didn't know how to turn his sound volume up the other day. And Joel and I couldn't tell him how because we didn't even know what the keys look like on an Apple keyboard. We were really up the creek. And so we finally just told him to use the telephone as a workaround. The tech support world is completely different, and I have all this knowledge, and I can fix so many things in the I'd be back square zero. And my wife, and it wouldn't be just a matter of switching me, it would be switching both of us. And it sort of goes on and on and on. So
no, it's not an easy, by no means am I implying or saying it's easy. It's especially when you're coming from something else. And
no, but what I'm saying is it's not just a question of what machine I prefer.
Right.
That I am linked into social networks that, and in a way, when you choose your primary computing platform, you're choosing your friends, at least the ones you're going to be exchanging to any technical information, and even email. I mean, I get email from Mark and from his Outlook running on his iPad, and and it comes down as plain text because there's incompatibilities between the different mail systems. You'd think that when you're using all the greatest and the best and cutting edge everything, that basic stuff like encryption, encoding of characters in a mail would be solved problems. But there is this big divide between the universes, and it's painful.
yes,
But Paul, there's no reason why you can't. I have Thunderbird, and I've set it up to be my primary mail client on iMac.
Oh, sure.
On the and I've done the same thing with Firefox. And again, it was quite easy to port over. I took my definition files from Linux and just moved them over into the proper profile directory.
but you guys, Paul and George, you're more skilled than the average one of the people on this call.
Yeah, but Thunderbird is
even though we know a lot, but we don't know the details that you do. And for what's easy for you is not necessarily easy for the rest of us.
But Thunderbird, you have to understand, is a hardware platform agnostic mail service because they have ported it all. It's not from Apple and it's not from Microsoft. It's it's from Mozilla, and they make sure it works on all these different devices. But if you're going to use Thunderbird, you're not going 100% in on Apple, right? You're hedging your bets there.
It's very hard to go 100% on anything. I still use Gmail.
Yeah, but in that case, I still use Apple Mail on my iPad and my iPhone, and my like I said, on Linux and Windows and the iMac, it's all Thunderbird.
Okay.
As far as I can tell, I use SMTP to connect directly to Comcast. They use the SMTP protocol to send the mail directly to me, and I store it in my Apple mail area. It works just fine.
Are you sure you mean SMTP and not POP3?
I might be POP3. I'd have to look up what they're doing, but it's using it's not storing the stuff on the web. I intentionally configure my mail service on using a web app with Contest to delete its own copy of my incoming mail a week after I've received it.
That sounds like POP3.
POP's fine.
SMTP is the server to server protocol.
Okay.
And it's not stored anywhere unless the one server can't get a connection. It will just store an individual. It'll temporarily hold on to an email until it can push it through. But POP is the protocol that will accumulate your mail on the server until you log in, and then it downloads it all and takes it off the server. That's POP, Post Office Protocol.
Well, what I do when I go to my mail is I just push a button saying I want to read my mail, and it goes to the server, picks up the messages that are queued, stores them locally on my Mac, and then I manage those internally. I don't keep any of my mail except as a short-term backup on the Comcast server.
Yeah.
But Griff, do you read your mail on any other device?
No.
He doesn't have a smartphone.
So that's why POP works for him.
Yeah.
So it's really hard. That we all have unique things that we do, and it's really hard to apply them to other people because each of our situations is very different and, not necessarily complex, but very different. And you gotta design it almost individually. Mark, before we move on to John Tomaszewski and his demos, did you want to say something else? I see your hand is up.
Yes, just with getting back to Apple, not email. I want to make a remark about Apple support. I had a tricky problem and I called them. It took me over an hour just to make them understand what the problem was. And that's on them, not on me. They're not as skilled as you would wish. However, they were very nice to me and they tried very hard. And I learned when I was speaking to them that the guy I ended up with finally confided in me. He said that Apple support never ends. This is interesting. If you have an Apple product from many years ago, theoretically, their support has been terminated, but in practice, they will do their telephone support forever. Of course, it's a question whether they have anybody who has the skills that go back far enough. But I do want to compliment them on their good intentions. They make the attempt to support by telephone. They will support your hardware and your built-in software permanently, even though they don't admit that on their websites.
And I can reiterate that. My machine is almost 8 years old now, and I bought Apple Care, which I think got me support for 3 years. And once or twice a year, I continue to use it, and they continue to not give me a hard time. And they have different classifications. You can usually get pretty quickly to an expert, but sometimes if it's a really unique problem, it's hard for them to figure out who they need or whatever. But 90% of the time, I've been very pleased with my Apple support iterations, and I really only do it 2 or 3 times a year on average, so it's not a lot. But almost always, there were 2 instances where I don't remember what they were anymore, but I know I was dissatisfied. But on almost all of them, I come away satisfied.
Meanwhile, on Microsoft, they haven't answered the phone since 1985.
Yeah, well, that's, it is a different approach. Apparently, though, in Microsoft's behalf, at least I understand that the Microsoft Store is similar to the Apple Store. That you can set up an appointment, you can go there, and they'll help you with most anything. So I've been told, usually for free, unless they have to buy a product. But I've never
Are there-
tried that. They didn't
Are,
exist.
are there any Microsoft stores left?
Oh, isn't there the one in
Bridgewater.
not Basking Ridge,
Bridgewater.
Bridgewater Mall has one.
Bridgewater. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's still there.
I
So
thought
I
it
don't
had-
know. But I'm
I
pretty
thought
sure.
it had closed. I don't know. I can check
I
it
don't know.
out.
I don't know either. I haven't gone there, but I know one. I mean,
The Bridgewater store is open.
Okay,
Oh, okay.
John knows.
Could I say one more thing? I just feel it's important. Most of us have spouses, and you might be sharing your computer. I devoted particular attention to that with the Mac. The Mac operating system does not natively encourage you to share files with another user. This is a very surprising thing. Windows is completely different. In the Mac, if you go to somebody else's file that you have access to and you want to do something with it, you end up having to make a second copy, which is a really bad thing. I found a solution to that. And I don't want to go into it right now because it's simple to do, but very hard to explain. So if anybody has that issue with Apple, we could discuss it offline. But that's the problem, that the Apple support had absolutely no idea how to deal with. They never figured it out at all.
I'm
But I
surprised.
have the answer to it.
Well, I have an answer too. It might be the same.
Yeah, but we shouldn't go into it now
We
because
shouldn't
it's
go
going to
into it
take
now
too much
because-
time.
We want, I mean, John Tomaszewski has some things he wants to share with us. I don't want our
Yeah.
audience to completely diminish. But we'll have more of the, for any of you that have comments about today, was it useful? Do you want to do it again? How could we improve it? Please let me know, because that's what I'll use to move us forward. Anyway, let's switch now to John Tomaszewski.
All right. I think, am I up?
Yep, you're up and I
Yeah,
can hear you.
up. Okay, good. Yeah, I just found a few things that I wanted to show. It's going to be pretty quick. And it's on the iPhone and the iPad. One is called the Information Center. Let me just bring up my screen share. I think somebody, I think it's there. Are you seeing what I'm showing?
I see picture view.
IOU, the iOS Control Center and Calendarium is the two things I'll be talking about. Okay, so the first one is, how do you open the iOS Control Center? What the iOS Control Center is, and I'll show it to you real quick, is all you do is pull down on the right-hand side of the iPad.
We're not seeing it, John. We
Oh,
have
you're not
just a
seeing it?
picture- No, we have just a picture of you.
Oh, okay, well, let me go back and
Yeah, try again, John.
go back out and go into Zoom and do a screen share. Screen, there we go. This will do it, I think.
No, we still just get the picture of you.
Hold
It's
on,
a different
hold on.
picture. It's a still
Hold on.
picture. Yes.
Now,
Yes.
Yes, you are sharing your
Okay.
screen.
now let me just get back to where I was.
Yeah, now we see your,
Okay, so the first thing is, what it is it's a I didn't want to do that. It's the iOS Control Center, which is offered on all iPads and iPhones. What it does is allow you to access a lot of apps that you use regularly, and it's very simple to get to. All you have to do is, you have to put your finger on the right-hand side of an iPad and pull down, and all these apps will come up that you use all the time, which I will go over in a little bit, some of them. Or if you have an iPhone, you actually go from the bottom of the screen and move up. Now, how you get to that, and by the way, I left links that will show you how to do this in the chat section if you're interested. So you go to your settings icon, which is on the left there, and that will bring up the control center, which you see in blue there. And from there, when you hit the control center, you get all the different apps that are available: a timer, a camera, text size, and I've got the red arrow, which shows you the hamburgers, which, if you don't know, if you can grab those and move those up and down, so you can change the priority of which ones you want to see. And you can customize that by going to the bottom, which I'll show you in a second. So basically what it does is it brings up the screen with a kind of a blurred image. And the first one is the access controls, which you'll see the little plane, which is if you're going on a plane, that shuts off the things that they don't want on. The one next to it is the ability, the little, I don't know what you'd call it, kind of 3 circles or 4 circles with like a Pac-Man thing. That's if you're in a room with someone that has an Apple product, you can hit that and it turns on share. Of course, there's your Bluetooth, which is not on now in that picture, and your Wi-Fi, which you can turn on and off from here. You can also control whatever song you're listening to right from the thing, so you don't have to hunt to the program that you're on. The little lock with the arrow on it allows you to, if you're doing something and you don't want to switch from profile to horizontal, you can put the lock on. And the night little moon there will shut off notifications for it. Screen mirroring rather. That's so that if you have an Apple TV set up or a TV with Apple in it, you can actually put your screen directly onto that. So if you're watching a movie or if you just want to use a big screen, you can control your brightness and your sound from there. And available controls, we'll go over those real quick. If this works, there we go. That never came up before. Here we go. So some of the stuff that you can do right from that screen is you've got an alarm that you can set without having to find the alarm thing. You can do a calculator real quick. If you're in a store or at home and you get a QR code, you can click on that one. The dark mode you can turn on and off. That's if you turn that on, the screens that are white will turn dark with white lettering. That's not on everything, but some people have programmed that. Do not disturb, basically that turns off the thing if you're sleeping or if you don't want it to go on while you're doing something. They also have a driving mode, which if you're driving, it doesn't come on the iPad, but I believe it's on the iPhone, so that it turns off to silence calls, messages, and notification, which I personally think everybody should do when they get in the car. Guided use will limit your device to a single app, which a control available. There's a low power switch that you can turn on automatically. The magnifier, so if you can't read something, you can actually use the magnifying glass to look at the writing on the bottom of your pills and find out what they are. Music recognition, which I just found out is on there. So what that is if you're listening to a song on your iPhone or iPad, or for that matter, anywhere on TV, you can hit that and it'll tell you everything you need to know about that song. Personal, it can focus apps that you want to have personally on it. The orientation I went over, silent mode I went over, sleep I went over. You can hit your stopwatch from there. You can control the text size. And if you want to take a quick memo, voice memo, you can click that icon. And work focuses on the apps you want to use while you're at work. Most of us aren't still working. There's accessibility shortcuts, announce notifications. If you're on an iPad, you can use or you can control your Apple TV, you control the brightness, you can take a camera. If you have an iPhone, you can do your flashlight. Here's something that you can pair your iPhone or iTouch to your hearing device if you have that one automatically. Home to set up accessory apps in your home. You got night shift, which will change the brightness of your iPad. If you're reading at night, you don't want it on full bright. Noise control controls the noise in your iPods. And the one that I like is notes. So if you want to jot something down and, you know, if you're somewhere and you got to need a telephone number, this will open up notes in your iPad without having to look for it. Screen mirroring, which again is if you have an Apple TV, it'll go on there. This one is kind of neat. If I wanted to show you something, I can actually do a recording of screen recording by just clicking this, and a little record red thing comes up like it does for Zoom, and you can record the different screens that you want to show somebody. Sound recognition, we went through that. Spatial audio, there's a timer button, there's True Tone, which automatically adjusts the color intensity of the display to match the light in your environment. Volume control, which I showed you, and wallet, which I've never used, but that's some of the stuff that that you can do from there. So the next thing I'll be showing you after I give you a short demo of that is Calderium, which I think people who are history buffs will probably like. So with that, we'll go into there it is. So as you'll notice, I have recording on, which is interesting. So I've been recording all this in some huge file, which I didn't know. But if you see the one that's blinking and it's white, if you click on them, it takes you right to whatever. If you want to set an alarm, and then you go back, and I got to go down, and you notice that if you want to make a voice recording, it's the same thing. All you do is click on the one that you want, and it will bring that up without having to search all over for that app that you know you want to use. So I guess I could stop for, actually, I'll go through the Calderium too. What the Calderium is, and I put both of these information, this one, the chat that I gave you will take you to that app if you're interested in this. So we'll go out of here and go back into the Calderium app. It's kind of neat. It tells you when the sun sets and when it rises. If you hit the little Jupiter or Saturn icon, it'll show you where the planets are for those of you that are into planets. And if you hit the information button on the other side, the little circular one, it tells you how long the day is, how shorter, longer than shorter. It also gives you your latitude and longitude, and it'll give you the weather by clicking on the weather icon. But this is the app. It's pretty straightforward. It shows you everything that happened on the day, and you can click down. And the neat thing about it is if you see some thing that you like, you can click the button and it'll show you what's available on Wikipedia. So if we want to know about Pope Paul XII, it comes up. And it goes up, it usually goes back to about the 500s, 400s, 500s. So if we wanted to know about the Visigoths, you can see all the different things that will come up, and it'll take you to the Wikipedia app. So that's basically what I wanted to show you. Any questions? Let me get back to Zoom and take off screen share. Okay.
Well, I, for one, I've been using an iPhone for probably approximately 10 years. There's much more in Control Center than I was aware of. I mean, I use the flashlight from there and a couple of other things, but I guess I never really explored it.
Yep. There's a lot of things in there. That's one of the reasons I thought I'd give a little talk on it, because I'm sure we all have iPhones, and I'm sure a lot of us don't use that.
Yeah, no, I probably use, 15, 20% of the function of my iPhone, and I'm going to get a new one soon because mine is 6 years old, and it's amazing.
So, Paul, you have your hand raised, or is that from before?
It might be from before. I don't know that he's there right now.
I'll just say I second Tom's assessment. This is Mitch. Yeah, absolutely. I learned a lot. Thank you.
All right. Nolan, how did you like the Calderium map? History buff. Is he still on?
I don't know.
He sometimes wanders away.
All right, that's it. If there's no more questions.
Okay, well, I think these things are good because we learned, it's easy to do on your own, but you never get around to it. It doesn't quite make the priority. And so, looking at them now and then, you learn things. Okay, we've gone for an hour and a half, which is, I guess, getting to be our typical. Are you staying for an hour? I appreciate it. We'll meet again in 3 weeks. And the topic will be malware and ransomware. And George Cull will lead us on a discussion of that. And other than that, thank you all for attending. Thanks to speakers for putting your effort in and sharing with us. And hopefully we'll see you in 3 weeks. Well, we'll see you probably next week at Old Guard, but I'll see you at Tug in 3 weeks. So much for that.
Thank you, Tom. It was a great day.
Hope, and please do give me feedback, plus or minus, negative or positive, because I'm trying to plan what we're going to do in the future, and your input is very important. I think we got a lot out of this and should periodically go back to it, but I'd love for you all to share your thoughts with me on it. Thank you, and I guess I will leave. I can't end the session because it's not my session, but I will leave and hope you all have a good rest of the day.
Thanks a lot, guys. Did a good job.